Buenas tardes. Vamos a empezar ya. Y empezamos con uno de los platos fuertes del Congreso. Veo a cabecitas haciendo que sí. Sheila Jeffreys, que es escritora, activista, feminista radical, lesbiana, se unió a su primer grupo feminista en Manchester en el año 1973 y durante 25 años impartió clases de política sexual en la Universidad de Melbourne, donde fue profesora de ciencias políticas. Ha escrito nada más y nada menos que 13 libros. Seguro que muchas de nosotras hemos leído, si no todos, la mayoría. Entre ellos, el último del año 2025, Desarraigando la dominación masculina. Vive en el Reino Unido y es directora de Women's Declaration International. No ha podido acudir, pero sí que nos ha dejado su conferencia, nos la envió grabada. Y es lo que vamos a ver ahora. Gracias.
Hello, sisters. I'm going to talk today about sexual violence by boys against girls and female teachers in schools. I will suggest that the only effective way to deal with this is to provide girls with single-sex education. In mixed schools, girls have to suffer harm and deal with such a great amount of porn-created misogyny and sexual violence from boys that there is no chance that they can have equal educational opportunities. It's difficult to see how feminists can support knowingly subjecting girls to such harm. I will suggest that giving girls separate single-sex education is the only way forward if we are seriously in favour of equal education for girls. I went to a girls' secondary school in London in the 1950s and 60s. Almost all of the feminists I worked with in the women's liberation movement in the 70s and 80s did too. We gained our self-respect as girls and women from being treated as if we were entitled to dignity and valued as human beings in those schools. In the 1960s, the movement began, which aimed to desegregate education. The single-sex schools were merged with boys' schools to create what were called comprehensives. The single-sex schools were mostly abolished. I remember that the arguments made for abolishing single-sex schools included the following. One was that boys were easier to teach if they were mixed with girls. Their behaviour was better. This argument, of course, is about the welfare of boys, not girls. The argument that they were better for girls hinged on the idea that girls would gain the skills of dealing with boys and men that they would need to survive in the world after school if they learnt them early. This latter argument accepts that male domination exists and girls must be trained to fit into it. It does not envisage changing boys' behaviour for the benefit of girls. I understand that in Spain, feminists are likely to support coeducation for a rather different reason. They see girls' education as having been harmed by repressive Catholic girls' schools under Franco. It is different in non-Catholic countries. Girls' schools in the UK were not Catholic. Girls' schools were first set up by feminists, most often spinsters and lesbians, in the late 19th century, purely to help girls get good educations and move towards equality. It was a specifically feminist endeavour, not to do with creating good Catholic wives and mothers. That may explain why our perspectives are different. 1970s feminists in the UK saw coeducation as a disaster, definitely not an advantage. I began teaching in a girls' school in 1971. and read my first feminist book, Kate Millett's Sexual Politics, that same year. I joined my first feminist group, a women teachers group, in Manchester in 1973. I went on to teach in a mixed school and had no problem with young boys being verbally or physically abusive to me. However, I did find some teenagers who knew exactly what the only form of porn they had access to at the time, magazines, indicated about women's status. This was in the late 1970s, when I taught male teenage engineering apprentices the subject of liberal studies in a college in London. I entered the classroom on one occasion to find walls and windows plastered with photos of naked women from the porn magazines that they bought with their wages at the end of the week. They knew very well what porn was about and used it to try to intimidate me and show their contempt. There were no online porn resources showing the physical and verbal abuse of women in the 1970s. The boys who wanted to humiliate me had to use photos of naked women from magazines. In the 1980s, I was teaching mixed classes at a further education college, boys and girls from 16 to 18. I also became a lesbian and became involved in a group of revolutionary feminist teachers, lesbians in education. We were not radical feminists, but had more revolutionary, as we saw it, politics. We wrote papers, and a couple of books came from that time on our work in education. We were very clear that girls should be taught in girls' schools, and we were fiercely against the desegregation of education. Some of the lesbians who were in that group went on to impressive careers in girls' education and won awards for it. The sort of harassment, sexual harassment, that we wrote about girls suffering in mixed schools at that time consisted of such things as boys drawing penises on the edge of a page in a girl's notebook. We were really angry about that and considered that it undermined any chance of equal opportunity for girls. If they were constantly reminded of their inferiority, the penis was a symbol of superior status, and displaying it was a way to intimidate girls. But there really is no comparison between the routine but nasty sexual harassment that girls suffered then and the rapes and assaults that are happening today. The situation for girls today is very grim, and we could have had no way of imagining how bad it would become. The intensification of boys' harassment of girls is the result of the growth of the pornography industry. The pornography industry today is very different from the 1970s, when I was in the first anti-pornography group in London in 1977. Back then, I saw boy children looking at a full-page spread of women's genitals in a pornography magazine in a corner shop where I lived, and I was very disturbed. As a result, I formed the London Revolutionary Feminist Anti-Pornography Consciousness-Raising Group, the first such group in the UK. The issue was new and newsworthy. We got on the evening news, protesting outside corner shops that sold porn. We petitioned the Greater London Council, whose underground trains carried ads for sexually violent films, and we got them removed. We would not be newsworthy now. In 1980, we formed Women Against Violence Against Women, campaigning against sexually violent films and other kinds of pornography. For several years, we thrived, and there were more than 40 other WAVOR groups around the country. Now, though, porn is ubiquitous, and there is almost no mention of feminist agitation against it. Opposition may seem futile and unimaginable. As the industry has developed, along with developments in technology, it has been increasingly accessed by children, particularly boy children. In 2025, a UK report from the Children's Commissioner said that 2 in 10 boys of 13 and 14 years old access porn at least once a month. Another survey said that 1 in 5 boys of 16 to 21 watch porn at least every day, compared with 7% of girls. The children report that pornography is their sex education. So, school systems in many countries are introducing what is called pornography literacy to their sex education programs. This acknowledgement that porn may give some misinformation about sexual practice, e.g., that girls are objects for sexual use, but accepts that children will use it and need to recognize what is good and bad about it, as if there could be something good about this propaganda of woman hatred. There is no discussion of ending pornography, of course. This is a new world of sex education in which girls have no chance to encounter a view of sex more suited to their autonomy and pleasure. The evidence now that boy children are accessing porn and being influenced by it to hate women comes from both Australia and the UK. And that's the research I'll be using today. In Australian research, women teachers were interviewed about the problems they were having with boys. I don't know what the research shows in Spain, but I suspect it will show the same problems. The study in Australia found that as a result of pornography use, there was a heightened use of misogynistic language and behaviors by male students, some as young as 5. The researchers found a heightened use of vulgar, sexualized, and aggressive language being used primarily by boys during their interaction with women and girls. Boys were using terms such as slut and describing women as rapeable. This study was 2024. They also reported male students using animal noises, meowing or barking, or making offensive gestures, grabbing their genitals and making other rude gestures at girls and women in the school. Animal noises comes up in all the research on this subject again and again. One primary school teacher described how several students in her Year 1 class have been making sex sounds to herself, a co-teacher, and other students. She said that the boys do it so often that they do it without intention or thought now. Remember, these are primary school students, boys. Also, boys were found to be working in groups to physically intimidate their female teachers and peers. This includes corralling girls and women into corners out of sight of male staff. A survey of female students in UK schools in 2017 by the feminist organisation Feminista found that over a third, 37% of female students at mixed-sex schools had experienced sexual harassment at school. Almost a quarter had been subjected to unwanted physical touching of a sexual nature in school. Feminista understood this sexual harassment as having a detrimental impact on girls' confidence and self-worth. Both students and teachers report that as a result of sexual harassment, girls learn to take up less space, to position themselves at the edges of corridors, playgrounds, and classrooms. Girls also adopt strategies to avoid being noticed and singled out for unwanted attention. Even if this means they miss out on more positive attention and recognition of their achievements. It is not easy to see how these effects on girls can be consonant with equality in educational opportunities with boys. They are very obviously the very, very opposite of any kind of equality in education. One female student said, "The boys also slap the girls' butts and touch their breasts without any consent." Another said, "Boys often lift skirts up and whistle and treat girls in a sexist manner and nothing gets done about it." A female secondary school teacher said, In class, boys talk about girls' bodies and what they would do to them and make female sex noises at the teachers. And it's very interesting, the sex noises issue, because presumably it shows what prostituted women in pornography the noises they are making in the pornography, and the men are learning these supposed female sex noises, which are actually obviously made up by the prostituted women, and they learn them and they do them in the classroom. And that comes up all the time. So they make female sex noises, supposedly, at the teachers and at the girls. They ask girls in class if a particular photo was them, have they got it shaved, what it looks like. Girls have cried in class several times due to abuse of intimate photos. The making of what are called sex noises really is ubiquitous. A report in the UK on sexual harassment in schools by Ofsted, the government body that regulates schools, was published in 2021 and revealed the shocking extent to which children experience sexual harassment. It found that peer-on-peer, in fact, almost entirely boys against girls, sexual harassment was commonplace. 9 in 10 girls and half of the boys told Ofsted that they or their peers were regularly exposed to unwanted explicit images or videos. Most girls and boys, 92% of girls and 74% of boys, told inspectors that sexist name-calling was frequent. Children were not telling their teachers and other adults about their experience because the behavior had become normal. Ofsted concluded that school leaders should assume they had a problem with sexual harassment and sexual abuse, even with no reported incidents. An online harms expert told this inquiry that easy access to pornography has completely changed the culture in the playground and that it was having a very corrosive impact within schools. Witnesses described boys cyber-flashing hardcore pornographic images at girls in the corridor and airdropping nude images to other students in class. A BBC report in 2021 included this report by a female student. Amina is now 19 and still trying to come to terms with what happened to her at high school. She says her harassment started when she was in year 7, aged 11. I started to get bullied, and people were making rumors up about me. They were saying I would go home with so many different guys and have sex with them. That was really upsetting for me. It was during the summertime and we were practicing for PE. And then I'm sitting there with my friends. And then there's this group of boys next to us. And then I just feel a hand on my back forcing me onto the floor. And then this boy starts grinding on me. And I think during that moment, I just completely froze. And then I look up at my teacher and then he looks at me and then he looks away. I just felt so alone in that moment. Part of me felt that it was my fault. Because of people's responses. I remember telling myself to stay strong and just wait until I got home to cry. Now, this girl is obviously not having any possibility of an equal education. Now, one result of this kind of harassment is school absenteeism, which prevents girls from getting any education at all. A UK organisation called Agenda Alliance looked at the problem of school absenteeism in 2021 and saw sexual harassment as a major reason why girls would self-exclude. A girl they quote, explained how this happened. When I was 13, I started to stop going as much as I could get away with. There was a boy who would I would say it was sexual assault, because he used to deliberately grope other girls and me. He used to sort of target me and try and touch me, and it would make me not want to go. There was a female teacher who basically insinuated that it was my fault when she seen it happen. She blamed me for it happening, and I walked out. Now, Agenda Alliance explains the risks associated with such self-exclusion for girls. The girls would not simply lose out on a full education, but suffer the risks of child sexploitation. One girl says, "I would never be at school. One time I bumped into a group of grown men. I started spending time with them. To be honest, I had nowhere else to go. They wanted me to do stuff for them." So it is extremely serious that this sexual harassment, which may not be reported or may be ignored by staff, can cause girls to self-exclude from school and end up in child prostitution. Another problem, of course, is the sexual harassment of female staff. Boys in school now engage in quite severe sexual harassment of female staff, which mirrors the sort of abuse that girl students face. As one high school teacher told the researchers in a 2024 Australian study, male students will walk quickly behind female teachers to rush them down the stairs. In the case of one of the boys, he reportedly led some female, he'd been making sex sounds as a teacher. It was found that he'd been watching his brother's porn videos online. So sex sounds again. The 2021 Ofsted report found that teachers were, like girl students, targeted with digital-based abuse. 1 in 20 of the teachers who took part in one study said the misogyny they had experienced had been posted on social media, including Facebook, WhatsApp, and TikTok. Teachers have reported their faces being superimposed on pornographic images and being victims of upskirting. In 2019, a court found a student guilty of taking upskirt pictures of teachers. The judge noted that his actions had left his victims feeling violated, objectified, and vulnerable. In this study, some female teachers were so upset they left work in tears or declined to teach certain classes. In one school, supply teachers were reported to be refusing to work. And there's been a bit of commentary on how the sexual harassment is driving teachers, female teachers, out of teaching at this point. In an Australian study, a female teacher reported that she'd suffered a range of sexual harassment, ranging from having a 16-year-old female student tell a male student that "Miss wants to fuck you," to Year 9 students projecting pornography on a whiteboard behind her while she took the role. It's interesting. It's like the pornography that was used against me back in the 1970s when I was teaching. A survey of Australian female teachers on the front line of schoolboy sexual harassment showed that they are fleeing the profession, while terrorized girls are shunning school because of high-tech bullying and abuse. The report of one study on the sexual harassment of female teachers in Australia is entitled "Make Me a Sandwich," after the sort of sexist remarks that boys use to exert their authority over teachers. It's a well-known phrase used to mock women in popular culture. It's a contemporary example of the behavior that I experienced back in the 1970s from the pornography too. The study showed there was a heightened use of misogynistic language and behaviors by male students, some as young as 5. The teachers reported a heightened use of vulgar, sexualized, and aggressive language. The female staff who suffer harassment and intimidation from boy students include head teachers. In one case in the newspapers in the UK last month, a school was being criticised for banning a large number of boys aged 15 and 16 from school because they were harassing not just girls, but also the head teacher. It's alleged that around 15 boys surrounded the head teacher outside her office in a threatening manner. These were boys of 16 or so. Additionally, persistent disruptive behavior has purportedly led some female and supply teachers to leave work in tears or decline to teach certain classes. 19 boys were suspended after an incident in the assembly at this school, with the principal claiming their conduct was the most intimidating she'd experienced. The Australian feminist organisation Collective Shout carried out a survey of 1,000 female teachers in Australia in 2022 to 2023 about sexual harassment. They found that the teachers, and this is a summary, were propositioned, threatened with rape, subjected to sexist slurs and mimicking of sex acts seen in porn, and called the C word. While trying to just do their jobs, they were sexually moaned, groaned, and grunted at, asked for nudes, and intimidated. Many said that they did not feel safe at work. While much of the behaviour was exhibited by boys in years 9 and 10, a number of teachers reported children in kindergarten displaying inappropriate sexual behaviours towards other children and even towards teachers. As a result, a number reported significant mental health decline. Many took long-term leave, some changed schools. Still others decided to quit the profession. Of the 1,012 teachers that they interviewed, 80.6% reported being sexually harassed by students, almost entirely boys, and 58% reported feeling unsafe in the school environment thereafter. Almost 8% of survey respondents have changed schools as a result of being sexually harassed, and close to 2% have left the teaching profession. The harassment was most largely oral, consisting of sexual groaning and sexual name-calling. The most frequent aggressors were male students in years 9 to 10. But respondents reported sex noises being made at them by children as young as kindergarten, that is, up to year 3. Survey responses indicate that 12.7% of reported sexual harassment incidents were perpetrated by students in years 4 to 6. That is very, very young. As one respondent reported, moaning is a big problem. Even good kids are doing it to win favor with others. The moaners were, of course, boys. I was going to have a section here talking about the research on whether single-sex education is better for girls. There is a lot of it, and it tends to show advantages in various different ways, not just in grades for exams, but in confidence, in the reduction of stereotypes in particular, because girls in mixed schools are more likely to be sexualized, treated sexually, whereas in single-sex schools, girls can go on with being just ordinary young people and concentrate on their work. Now, what is to be done? More and more countries are banning access of under 16s to mobile phones or banning mobile phones in school. Unfortunately, this will not solve the problem because the boys will find access to misogyny some other way, as they did before mobile phones, though not so easily. Moreover, this is a gradualist and partial solution, whereas we are in an emergency. The situation now is simply an exaggeration of the problem that existed ever since we lesbian feminists in London, in the early 1980s, found that boys drew penises on the margins of girls' notebooks. The project of changing the attitudes of boys and men to the female sex is one that would take decades, and it does not seem to be being seriously considered in its entirety. What we do need to do is move towards segregating education and giving girls a chance at real equal opportunity in single-sex schools now. Thank you.